Hello, welcome back to BLO'S Closet. I am super excited to have you back here on my channel, and if this is your first time here on the channel, I am super excited to have you here as well. Welcome to BLO'S Closet. So in today's video, I am going to be sharing with us how to draft a princess dart pattern. So if you're interested in learning how to draft a princess dart pattern for your dresses or your blouses, keep on watching and let us get straight into this tutorial. For this project, I'll be making use of my brown pattern paper, which I already laid out here on my table and already ruled out some lines on this my pattern paper. So right here I have my shoulder line, and this my shoulder line is also my starting line. I marked out my bust point line, my waistline, my hip line, and my desired length. So placing my tape on that shoulder line, which is the starting line, I marked the distance from my shoulder to my bust point, which is 10 inches for me. I also marked out the distance from my shoulder to my waist, which is 16 inches for me. That is also my half length. And I also marked the distance from my shoulder to my hips, which is 26 inches. And finally, the length, my desired length, which is 33 inches. So feel free to use your desired length. I use 33 inches because I intend to create a particular design with this pattern. Next, I'll come on my shoulder line and I'll impute my neck width and my neck depth. I'm going to be using the standard measurement of 3 by 3 inches. Feel free to adjust this later on when you want to create your garment, but for now I'll be using this 3 by 3 inches, and I'll be using the help of my curved ruler to connect these points. On that same shoulder line, I'll be imputing my shoulder measurement. My shoulder measurement is 16 inches divided by 2. I have 8 inches, and I'm going to be marking that down there. However, if you intend to attach a sleeve to your dress, add an extra half an inch allowance to what you marked out on your shoulder, but I will not be doing that because I intend to use this pattern for a sleeveless dress. Next, I am going to come down by 1 inch from that shoulder mark that I made. I'll come down by 1 inch, and I'm going to be slanting this towards the neckline to create my shoulder slant. Next, I will mark out my chest line. To get my chest line, I am going to be marking out 2 inches above my bust point line. So this is one method you can use to get your chest line. Another method you can use is to divide your bust measurement by 6, add 1.5 inches to that, and mark out what you have from your shoulder slant downwards and rule out a line. I hope this is clear. Now on my chest line, I'll be marking out that same 8 inches that I marked out for my shoulder. This is to help me get a straight line, and I'll roll it out like this. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out what I have on this line, and I am going to divide it into 2 to get the midpoint, and I'll make a mark right there. Next, I'm going to be imputing my bust measurement divided by 4. My bust is 35 inches divided by 4 is 8.75 inches, and this will help me create my armhole curve. Now remember this mark that we made here on this line, I am going to be going in by half an inch, and I am going to be connecting these points together with the help of my curved ruler to create my armhole. After creating my armhole curve, the next thing I'll do is impute my darts. And in order to impute my dart, I'm going to be making use of my bust span measurements. That is my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. Mine is 7 inches, so 7 inches divided by 2 is 3.5 inches, and that is what I am marking on all these my lines right here. So after marking this point on all my lines, I am going to be ruling this out with the help of my straight ruler. For my dart, I'll be using 1 inch, which is standard. Divide that 1 inch into 2. I'll be marking half an inch on both sides of this my bust span line. Now for this my dart, it's going to be starting 1 inch below my bust point line, and it will end 2 inches above my hip line. I hope this is clear. Now I'll go ahead and connect these points that I marked out with the help of my straight ruler like this. Now that I am done creating my dart, I am going to measure out what I have all around my armhole, and whatever value I have, I'll be dividing that into 2 by folding my tape into 2 like this. And now I am going to be marking down what I have there on my armhole line, and this is going to help me create my princess seam. Now from the starting point of my dart, with the help of my curved ruler, I am going to be creating my princess curve. Feel free to use your freehand, but I am very terrible at using freehands actually. So now on this line, I am going to be marking 1/2 inch on both sides of this line. This means that I am creating another dart around my armhole area, which will give my bust more room. And with the help of my curved ruler, I am going to be connecting these points back to the starting point of my dart. Normally for princess seams, especially when you have a dart around your armhole area, this lower dart leg tends to be shorter, and because of this I am going to be extending this out, and I am going to measure out this dart that I marked out here, and I'll replace it right there. On my chest line, I have a little dart right there. If I measure it out, I have about 1/2 inch. I'm going to be replacing that on my chest line, and I am going to be connecting these two new points together to get my new armhole. So the reason why we extended this is to avoid shortages. It's better you have excesses on your lower dart leg side, that is your side front, than to have shortages. If you don't extend this, you may end up having shortages, which will not be nice. So next, I am going to be adding seam allowance on this my chest line, because we already imputed our bust measurements and also imputed this dart right here. So I added a seam allowance of 2.5 inches. So I measured out everything I have on my chest line and I repeated it on my bust point line. On my waistline, I am going to be imputing my waist measurement divided by 4. 30 divided by 4 is 7.5. Remember, we added a dart of 1 inch, so we are going to be replacing that so that we don't have shortages on the waist. And then I'll add my 2.5 inches. Make sure you replace your dart measurement, or else your measurement is going to be short by 1 inch. On my hip line, I am going to be imputing my hip measurement divided by 4, which is 10 inches, and I added my 2.5 seam allowances. Now just ignore this part. This is me trying to reduce the length of this pattern that I am drafting, so ignore that. So on this my new length line, I am going to be marking out exactly what I have on my hips, 10 inches plus 2.5 inches for seam allowance, and I added extra 1/2 inch for ease, and this is me connecting all these points together. So that 1/2 inch that I added for ease is not compulsory. Depending on what you're creating, you may need to add it or you may not need to add it. Use your discretion. All right, so the full length of what I have here is 32 inches instead of the initial 33 inches. And the next thing I am going to do is cut this pattern out along this line. So watch carefully so that you see where I am cutting. So I am cutting along the sides right now, and as you can see, I am cutting through that my new armhole. Do not forget to cut through your new armhole so that you don't have annoying shortages. So like I said earlier on in this video, you can create a princess seam on just your half length or even a full gown. So if you just want this to stop at the half length, you cut this out on the waist. Whatever you're drafting will just stop on the waist like this, so you cut it out. Or perhaps even if it's a gown and you want joinings at the waist, you just cut it out right here at the waist. So I'll go ahead and keep on cutting this my pattern, so pay close attention so that you see the areas that I am cutting out. So this is me cutting out the darts, and after cutting this out, this is what I have. This is my center front and this other part is my side front. So my pattern for the front is ready, and I'll go ahead to draft out my back pattern. The back pattern is slightly different from the front pattern, and for that I started by rolling out my zipper allowance line, and I rolled out 1 inch for my zipper allowance right here. I rolled out my shoulder line, my chest line. I did not impute my bust point line. I rolled out my waistline, my hip line, and finally my desired length. I hope this is clear. So the next thing I am going to do now is I am going to be starting from the shoulder, and I impute my neck width and neck depth. I'm using a neck width of 3 inches and a neck depth of 1.5 inches. Again, this is just for now. I can decide to adjust this later on. I am going to be taking all my measurements from this 1 inch line that I rolled out here. So next I am going to be marking out my shoulder measurement divided by 2, which is 8 inches, just like I did for the front. I came down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope, which I am going to be slanting into my neckline, and then I am going to be rolling out a straight line like this. Next, I'll measure out what I have there on that line, divide it into 2, and make a mark right there. Now from that mark, I am going to be going in by 0.25 inches, and on my chest line I'll be imputing my bust measurement divided by 4, which is 8.75 inches, and I'll be connecting these points together with the help of my curved ruler to create my armhole curve like this. So next I am going to be imputing my dart, and to do this I am going to be imputing my bust span measurement divided by 2, which is still 3.5 inches, just like I did for the front. So I'm going to be marking this on all the lines that I have, and with the help of my straight ruler I am going to be connecting these points together. Now on the waistline, just like I did for the front, I am going to be marking 1/2 inch on both sides of this line. And for the starting point of this my dart, I am going to be coming down by 1 inch from my chest line, and I'll be going up by 2 inches from my hip line, and I'll be connecting these points together with the help of my ruler. After creating my dart, I'll go ahead and measure out what I have around my armhole like this, and I'll divide whatever I have by 2 and make a mark right there, and this will help me create my princess curve. So from the starting point of this my dart, I am going to be creating my princess curve. I decided to use my free hand because my ruler was not giving me what I wanted. Rate my free hand, guys. Did I do well? All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be extending this line, and around this my armhole I will not be adding any dart like I did for the front because we don't have burst around the front. So this is me extending this line out, and I'm just going to be marking 1/2 inch, and from there I'll be creating a new armhole. This is to ensure that we don't have any shortages. It's better to have excesses than shortages. So this is my new armhole curve, and next I'll impute my horizontal measurements. So since I already have my bust measurement divided by 4, what I'll do is just add my 2.5 inches for seam allowance. On my waistline, I'll mark my waist measurement divided by 4, which is 7.5 inches. I'll replace this my 1 inch dart right here, and then add my 2.5 inches for seam allowance. On the hip line, I'm going to mark out my hip measurements divided by 4, which is 10 inches, and then I would mark out my 2.5 inches for seam allowance. So right here, guys, I noticed that I made a mistake. I started my measurements from the very tip of this my pattern paper instead of this 1 inch zipper allowance line. So I'm just trying to correct this. In order to not be confused, you can decide to fold in this your zipper allowance line so that you don't get confused and take your measurement from the wrong place. So please, guys, do not make the same mistake that I made. Next, on my length line, I am going to be marking what I have on my hips line and add extra 1/2 inch for ease allowance, just like I did for the front. And the next thing I'm going to do is connect these points together. Now I'll go ahead and cut out this pattern. So watch closely to see the areas that I am cutting out. Please make sure that you cut on your new armhole line to avoid stories that touch the heart later. At this juncture, guys, our back pattern is almost ready, and the next thing I'm going to do is eliminate zip bulge. And to do this, I'll come to my waistline and I would mark 0.75 inches inwards. You can mark 1/2 inch, but I decided to mark 0.75 inches inward because my back is more curved inwards. So I connected that line towards my chest line, and I connected these other points towards my hip line, and I am going to be shading this part out because I am going to be cutting this out. The back pattern is ready right now, and the final thing I did was label this my pattern. So I labeled this pattern the back, who this pattern is for, how many pieces I should cut. I indicated my center back, so I'm going to be cutting 2 pieces for each of these pattern pieces. And for the front, I did the same thing. I'm going to be cutting the center front unfold 1 piece, and the side front I'm going to be cutting out 2 pieces. And here you have it, guys, a princess dart pattern that you can use to create any garment of your choice. If you found this video helpful in any way at all, give this video a like so that more people can get to see it. Subscribe to this channel if you're not yet subscribed. Drop your thoughts, your questions, your suggestions in the comment section, and I'll see you in my next video, guys. Bye.